Welcome into another episode of Story World. Steve Schramm here, your boy Al. How's it going, man?
Al's doing well. How is Steve doing?
Steve's doing great, a lot better than this has been a rough couple weeks for me. I've had thumb injuries and I've had fevers and electrolyte imbalances and you name it, I've had it. But I am so I'm feeling a lot better and I'm ready to attack this new week with a renewed vigor. Is that the right word? So yeah, I'm doing good.
I sent a message to you, Steve, earlier in this week saying if I was a betting man, I would put on a lot of money that you're going to get hit by a car within the next week or so. Um,
Yeah, that was great, by the way. I'm
I,
glad you said that.
I think it's going to happen. It'll happen.
Well,
It could only
well,
get
I
worse.
Yeah, well, we're just gonna pray for that does not happen because that would be really, really bad. So,
Yeah, right.
we're talking about the Rings of Power in this episode, which I'm
Yes.
super duper excited about. If you don't know what the Rings of Power is, why are you listening to Story World? I'm
Do you
not
have a
real sure.
TV?
Do you have a TV? Do you have the internet? Do you life? Have you ordered anything from Amazon? I mean, they've got it all over their packaging. So if for some weird reason you're listening to this and you don't know, the Rings of Power is, of course, the brand new series from Amazon, where it is in the Lord of the Rings world. It is in Middle Earth, and they are. Well, I'll let Alex speak to the details of the show. I think he probably could tell them better than me. But basically, it's Amazon's new entry into the Lord of the Rings universe, and they have 5 seasons slated for this show, and so we thought we'd kind of just offer some analysis about it so far.
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of people call it I even call it the Lord of the Rings show. It is
Yeah.
Rings of Power because it's very separate from Lord of the Rings. Takes place, I think it's 3,000 years before Lord of the Rings at the end of the Second Age. There's some time crunch that they work with, but yeah, so far they've had 5 episodes come out. Steve's watched 4. I'm interrupting his night tonight as we're filming this for him to watch the 5th one, but they have 5 right now. So we've as I don't know if Steve's mentioned before. We have he's kind of set up a texting group with a couple of friends of ours, and we discussed the Lord of the Rings a lot. So we've had a lot of time to kind of munch on it and talk about it, and kind of get down to the nitty gritty of what we think about it. This is kind of a follow up to our last podcast too. So if you didn't watch our last one, I encourage you to go see it, where we talk about kind of our thoughts on adaptations and fan fiction and what we
Yeah.
think they should look like, the different kinds. So probably before listening to this, jump into that one. That might kind of clear up some things of kind of how we're approaching Rings of Power in general. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's definitely going to play a part here because if you go into this thing and I don't want to get too deep into my analysis already here, but if you go into this thing thinking that it's going to be like Tolkien resurrected from the grave and wrote this new series for us and then just quietly dipped back under, that is not what we have here. And I'm not sure it's what anybody at Amazon at least thought that they were creating. But yet, one of my big gripes is that there are some people who, I guess, maybe even in an unspoken way, in a hidden way, they expect this to have sort of the same quality of literary beauty as something that Tolkien himself created. And the sheer reality of the matter is, I think that's an unreasonable expectation to place on this particular piece of work. I think it should be evaluated on its own merits for what it is, rather than being mad about something that it isn't. So that's kind of
Yeah,
my take.
I think that's a good explanation. Just to add on to that, one other thing, kind of before we get into our points, this isn't necessarily a review. We're not going to give it a score 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And we're not really doing a deep dive analysis, episode by episode. We're more doing a general, broad review of what we like about the show, what we don't like, if it's good fan fiction, if it's not, and kind of the more general aspects of it. It's maybe help people out there who like to write fan fiction or just a kind of a different way to look at it. And like what Steve said, this show never set out to be a documentary of sorts for the Silmarillion, which I would love to see. But right from the outset,
Yeah.
even it was they only had access to certain material. There's characters that are made up. I mean, it is a very, hard fan fiction show. And so I think what Steve was saying is true is you have to look at it in that light, not if they're staying true to the book in every single aspect. Anyway, I think
Yeah.
that's a good start.
Yeah, I think so too. So maybe we talk a little bit about our own experience. So my, like my I have good and bad things about the show. And I think I think, did you follow that same convention too? Are we each going to talk about some good stuff and some bad stuff?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I think
so.
so. Yeah. So as we each approach our thoughts on this, like for me at least, it would be helpful to know that I am not what you might call a token purist. Simply because while I've always, had an awareness of his work and an appreciation for it. Um, I'm not, again, I'm not a purist. I didn't like grow up on it. I was not like an obsessive reader growing up. I didn't even see the movies until recently. I've only seen even the first one, recently. And, I haven't even seen the second or third movies, which, side note, I am going to have to rectify this very soon because there is now a spoiler around every single corner, no matter where I turn when I'm watching these YouTube breakdowns and all of this. It's like always there. So I'm gonna have to just go ahead and knock out these movies and then go back and read the books to fill in the additional context.
Mhm.
But in general, all that to say, I'm very new to Lord of the Rings, and so I have finished the first entire book. I've also finished the about half of the no, probably about three quarters, I would think, of the second book. So I have definitely spent some time with Tolkien's writing at this point, and it is no doubt incredible writing. I have a very deep appreciation for it, but not so deep that I am opposed to seeing something new in the world that he didn't write. So that's kind of where I'm coming from as far as my level of Tolkien knowledge and appreciation.
I'm really glad that you got into Lord of the Rings too. Just kind of crosses over. Steve's and I world have kind of clashed since we started this podcast, where Steve's kind of delved a little bit into the fiction side, and I've branched out more. We were just talking about websites that we're making tonight and everything. So I think Steve's worlds and I are starting to kind of clash a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's fun to see a little bit of crossover. So
Yeah.
my history with Lord of the Rings is it really was the first line of fantasy that I got into as a kid. I was probably around 7 or so. My stepfather got the cassette tapes for The Hobbit. I forget which version it was or who did it. I just know it was a dramatized one with music and everything. And as a kid, it was just phenomenal. And he would always tell us stories from the Silmarillion. I was a little bit too young to read that. It just would have been too much for me. But he told us stories about it. And then I was 9 when the first Lord of the Rings movie came out. And just so all through growing up was just Lord of the Rings, whether it was video games, watching the movies, eventually reading the books. I would not say I am qualified to sit up on a panel of token scholars and be able to recite every single name and relationship and be able to analyze every single story down to the T. But I have read the Silmarillion 3 times, Lord of the Rings a few times, The Hobbit a few times, and amongst other research. And so my general knowledge of token lore is very good, even if my specifics are not. As far as token purist, it's hard to tell sometimes what that actually
What
means.
does that even
I
mean,
mean,
right?
yes, let me
Yeah.
put it this way. If uh, if the Rings of Power were rewriting token canon, I would be pretty upset. However, that is not what they're doing. Token's writing is token canon, and this is a fan fiction. I think what the new what the new Star Wars kind of trilogy incepted was rewrite a lot of canon, if I'm correct, right? I'm not huge into the Star Wars stuff, but didn't Disney come out and say like, hey, this is actually new canon now in this situation? I think that's
I'll be
what happened with
honest,
a lot of
that
things.
sounds familiar, although I am not very up on that
So,
myself.
gotcha. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but if this was, if Amazon bought the token estate and they said, "Hey, we're gonna, change how token did this," I would be pretty upset with that. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Going into it, I will just say up front, do I like Rings of Power? I do like it. I think there's a lot of good to it, and I think there's some things that kind of rub me the wrong way in it. But I do enjoy it. So anyway,
Yeah.
Steve, why don't you start us off with your list of some things that you do like about it?
Yeah, 100%. So I would say, first of all, I mean, the production is just insane, right? I mean, this is the most expensive TV show of all time, and you can tell. I mean, the level. I remember whenever this thing was, they were still just in the early, maybe not the early phase, but they were releasing trailers, right? They were,
Yeah.
and I remember that. coming across a thread on the internet where they were complaining because like in the trailer because the CGI looked so fake. And it's like if you read anything on the internet for 3 seconds about it, it was like it was real. It wasn't
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
it wasn't the CGI
yeah,
that looked fake. It was actually the real thing. And
eh,
so,
yeah, yeah,
look at I mean, that of course, that itself is an isolated
mhm,
incident, but it speaks to the mindset and to the cynicism of how some people are looking at this show. Basically, they're looking for any problem that they can find, and they're amplifying it. And it's like I've got a dear brother in Christ who I love on my Facebook feed right now, who is absolutely a token purist, and he is freaking out. And he does these pithy little, whatever episode, 4 part 1 review or whatever. And it's just like it's not even a review, it's just a little mini complaint about a very
yeah,
specific thing. And I'm like the production on this show, like let's give it some credit here. The production is absolutely insane. I feel like they're like John Hammond in Jurassic Park, spared no expense. They have spared no expense with this thing. They're doing I think, fantastic job on the actual production value of it. Um, so so there's that. And maybe I'll share one more good thing of mine, and then we can toss that over to you for a
yeah,
minute.
that sounds good. Yeah,
Um, I really like the characters in general. Do I have maybe little beefs with the specifics? Maybe, and I think you might have some. I'm going to let you get into the specifics on things, and maybe we can chat about it.
mhm,
In general, I think the characters are pretty good and pretty strong. I do wonder about the direction of certain characters where they're going to go with it, and there might even be some things from episode 5 that help that I don't know yet. I'm a little I will say I just don't want to spoil anything, but if there's one character that I do have just a little bit of issue with, it does Galadriel would be one that I have some problems with, but even her overall I like, right? I think that like her lines have been great. I think she's a strong actress. I think the first couple episodes especially, she was kind of like, kind of really carrying it. And I mean, I think she's a good actress and she's playing the part well, even if I maybe have some gripes with
yeah.
some things that they've designed about her character. Overall, love the characters in general.
Yeah, cool. That's one thing that I do like about the show too. I think I'm actually pleasantly surprised with the characters so far. I didn't think I would like Arondir just because um I just didn't know how they would portray an elf, a Sindarin elf, and I just didn't know how that would work. And I knew that kind of beforehand you knew that they're from trailers and stuff that there was a love story between him and the human woman, and I didn't know how I would like it, but so far he's slowly turning into one of my favorite characters. And so,
Yeah,
and then all the other
mine too.
characters, some characters are like right off the back, like Elrond and Durin. I love those scenes. Their chemistry between them is just great. The friendship, and so there's some really, really good characters in the show. So I'm with you on that. Um,
100%.
so one of the benefits that I guess one of the good things that I do like is even though this is a show that's kind of appealing, well, definitely appealing to the masses. It's trying to garner as much views as possible, really is the end game here. There's still quite a bit of just token lore in there from like the Cimmerillion. Obviously, they had to pull from like other parts. They didn't have permission from the Cimmerillion, but things that make someone who has read the Cimmerillion and knows, tokens, universe, just kind of smile and just kind of enjoy seeing things put in there. Like at the very beginning, not talking specifically about if the intro was good or not, but in the first episode, seeing the trees of Valinor, that was really cool. And then Arendelle's references because Elrond is his son, and just how he became a star, and there's a lot of references that talk about him. And so just having those little tidbits just kind of make me smile because it's like, oh, that's cool. Like that's a reference where there's millions of people out there watching this that have no idea what that is. But it's kind of cool that they still put that in there because it's still like a really neat token reference. And there's just a lot of small things in there that get put in that I really enjoy. Um,
Yeah.
and to kind of, I guess my last thing too, as far as the mass appeal for that is, I think one thing that's been great is For instance, like my wife doesn't care too much for Lord of the Rings movies, but so far she really likes this show. And I've seen a lot of other people say that. And so at the very least, it's brought a lot of people into Token's world. And on the flip side of that, people who say maybe did like Lord of the Rings, kind of in the middle of the ground, maybe they're not like new to Lord of the Rings, but they're also not nerdy about it. A lot of people actually like watching reviews and actually getting into the lore. So even though if the show messes up on something with lore related, and I have some gripes with that I'll get to, people are researching and saying, "Hey, is that actually really true?" And then they'll actually see, oh no, Token actually wrote it like this in the Silmarillion. Here's how the show messed it up. And so people kind of in the end are getting good Token knowledge anyway through research on the internet. And so it's introducing a lot of
Yeah.
people into Token's world. And this is just, I think, a great gateway for that.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll just check off one of mine there as well because
Yeah.
I had the same thought. I think it's a really solid show, just in terms of introducing this new generation to it. I mean, look, I guess if I had to choose, I would rather it have the sort of mass appeal because this is another one of my, my sort of gripes in that, like, they do have to design the show for mass appeal
Yeah.
because it's the most expensive show that's ever made, and they need to make some freaking
Yeah.
money, right? They
Yeah.
need basically for them to do this, they need to create some Token fans. They need to create some new Token fans, probably quite a few of them. And so I think if the show is meant to do that, then I think it's doing a fantastic job. Like I was going to say, I think it to me, if I had to choose, I would rather it have mass appeal and still be pretty darn good and close for, in terms of the lore and bringing in all those other stuff and satisfying those hardcore fans, and introduce a lot more people to the world who will go back and read some of the original stuff. And certainly even a percentage of those who will now go in and read like the Silmarillion and the appendices and all these other things. I think I would rather it do that than, if they sacrificed mass appeal and only appease
Right.
the Tolkien purists, there'd be a lot of great stuff in there that they would get and nobody else would. And it's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, I would
know.
I would love to see like a show of Rings of Power on this scale of production doing a shot for shot, like documentary style of the Silmarillion. Like that would be, I probably wouldn't do anything else in life except put that on repeat, but it would never be made because it just wouldn't. It wouldn't have the same appeal. Maybe some people be like, well, good that, don't make it. I'm kind of line where, well, I want to get some more Token in my life, And so if there's an adaptation like this, then I am all
Yeah.
for it. I'm wondering too, just as a side note, I don't know if there's any way that they put out stats like this. It's kind of hard to, I would think, but um, I wonder how much, like, either through Kindle or other electronic forms, readership has gone up of the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings
Mm,
since this has come out.
yeah,
That'd be a
that's a
pretty
really
cool
good
stat to see.
question. Yeah. I
I'm
mean, I'm
sure it's gone up
sure it's gone
somewhat,
up.
whether it's, I don't know if it's a minuscule percent or an outstanding number, but that would be just kind of cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so what other kind of good points do you have on your list?
Yeah, I have two more. One small point, but I love the music. I'm a big music guy, and
Yeah.
so especially during, I think it might have been the final scene of episode 4. It was just musically like, oh man, I don't know, it was just over the top, and I felt, I don't know, like at the end of that, I think it was the last episode that I got this feeling. Like I just got this feeling of,
That's it.
man, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, that
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, that was a freaking
Yeah.
that was a production. Like, I feel like I just watched a great hour-long movie just from all the vibes of the production and everything. It almost reminded me of, like, um, the finale of, like, a Broadway
Mhm.
type show or something like that. Obviously not in the style, but
Yeah.
just in the feeling that it created in me. And so I like that. And of course, I like the music from the movies and everything as well. In fact, the audiobooks that I'm listening to of The Lord of the Rings are an unofficial version of the audiobook by a guy named Phil something. I forget his last name, but the dude's like just a creative mastermind. I mean, total genius. Does everything himself, all the voices, all the music, all the whatever. It's just one of those guys. And he uses the music from the movies to just help create it's like an audio drama experience of the
Mhm.
book, and I'm really loving it. So I think the music certainly enhances it. Am I correct in that did the same is the same guy doing the music for that did it for the movies? I thought I
No,
saw that, but maybe not.
fun fact though, Bear McCreary, who's doing it, is the yep, he's the guy who composed the music for God of War, my favorite, one of my favorite video games.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yep,
cool. Very
so
good.
it's kind of
Alright,
cool.
so yeah, not the same guy, but
Yeah,
whatever. It's I
at
thought I
least
saw that, but
that I know of. I could be wrong, but I don't
cool.
think so.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
yeah,
So my
it's one of those
go ahead.
moments too, especially when the music in certain there are certain shots that just really gave me that like Lord of the Rings token vibe that I got watching the movies as a kid. I think one of those scenes was the orcs chasing Arondir and Theo through the
Mhm.
woods. And it was just like it just kind of made me smile because like this is what I want, like this feeling here. And when those
Yeah.
moments happen, it's really incredible.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, yeah, totally awesome. And then I guess the final point here that I wanted to make on that, on the good side, maybe we
Mm.
should have done the bad first. I don't know. Was that? But my bad is well, we'll get to it in a second. I believe they're doing the world justice, right? This is just the point that I wanted to make.
Mm,
Like, I really think that this is not bad. This is not a bad thing. This is on the whole, it is better that the Rings of Power
mhm.
exists
Yeah,
than that it doesn't exist. I
absolutely.
think. And I'll be honest too, I'm really enjoying like I'll raise my hand there. I'm one of the guys like as soon as the episode's over, for me, I get an extended episode because I go check out the heavy spoilers review,
Mm,
Ben Shapiro's review. I'll check out the Nerd of the Rings breakdown because I want to get into the Easter eggs and see a lot of the background stuff, at least as much of it as they could possibly work with. And um, so I do think they're doing the world justice. I mean, in my awareness, only like personally know a few people who just like are disgusted that this thing exists, kind of thing. And
yeah,
I'm just like, so like I think the world is better for it than without it. So that's just kind of my opinion on that.
and well, that kinda goes to the first part of my, my last few points. I'll go through 'em quickly of the good is, everyone was and even me a little bit was worried about maybe, like, wokeness that would be introduced in here or introduced, like, very heavily,
Yeah.
just kind of, like, one-sidedness and, ideologies kinda slipping in there, and so far, there's been none of that. 0.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of it.
And, like, this is a
It's
movie
it's been very clean.
you can watch with your kids and have a
Yep.
great time. And as long as the content stays that way, that's gonna be 50 hours when it's all said and done of great
Yep.
fantasy storytelling and action and adventure, that you can
Oh, yeah.
watch with your family. Like, you can't in today's world, you just can't find long running series like that do that. So at the very
Especially
least
not that are the most popular show on
Oh,
television.
exactly.
Well, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in the most like, a show with this kind of production value, like, you almost think that they have to work in stuff like that to appease everybody, but so far, we don't have it. So, I'm happy so far with
Yeah,
that.
it's been great. Yeah, and along with that, kind of like what you went, I think that the acting has been really great. I know a lot of people have complained about. I think those are just kind of the rumblers and the grumblers. I could maybe see,
Yeah.
I guess maybe in everything. There's a couple scenes where like, oh, that's kind of like an awkward like thing that they did, or but as a whole, there's been range from good actor performances to just top of the line. So far, I think it's been really great. The filming, the scope of it, the score. Um, I honestly too think again another thing where people were making fun of the writing and how like cheap it is, and then like they got like high schoolers to write it. I think that there's been quite a few really good lines in there that I have really liked. I haven't written it down, but I
Yeah.
should, but there's a lot of pretty good quotes in there that have come up. One of my favorite things is maps. I start a lot of stories that I write with maps. That's how I think about things. And I love the maps in this show. Just the transition from scene to scene. And then also like in a lot of especially in Numenor, you'll see maps laying around. And it's just like it gets me so excited. So I love that they incorporate the maps. And then I love the orcs. Just seeing more of a side to them. That's been terrific. One of the better parts of the show, I think. And then one part that I didn't think I would like, but for some reason I do. I think maybe it's just because of Nori and the adventurous like spirit. Maybe gives me Willow vibes. But I love the Harfoot parts of the story. I know a lot of people don't, and I kind of get
Mhm.
why. But for some reason, I'm just really liking that part of the story. It feels more like very light fantasy. Like I like the silliness of it sometimes, and I don't know. I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I'll tell you on that note. So I do agree. I forget who it was who made this observation. One of the people that I listened to with respect to the show, but um, somebody made the observation that they kind of feel like they were, inserted to just give it, the sort of the Hobbit type vibes that people sort of expect to see from Lord of the Rings, to make it warmer. So I would say a couple things on that. My from my perspective. Number one, um, I could see the current show working without it. So I'm not opposed to the Harfoots. Like I like that storyline. Um, but I could also see it being, like, without that break. Like, I could see it working with Bates because all the other storylines are mostly, like, intense. You get a little bit of mystery around what's going on with Elrond and stuff like that,
You
but
can see the
everything else.
conflict pretty easily.
Yeah, exactly, and so I wouldn't be opposed to it being more of a, that conflict, almost war-esque, type of environment all the time. That said, Um, and we'll get into this in a minute when I start talking about my I'm gonna put in quotation marks bad when I get to my bad stuff. But they're gonna do something with this storyline it's all gonna connect, right? It has to be. This is how writing works, right? It's all gonna connect. So there is going to be like right now, it almost feels like there's not a reason for them to be there. But I know there's going to be already parts of their story, like you can tell it's going to be good and it's going to tie in. So, I guess what I'm saying is I'm while a lot of their scenes, like, feel unnecessary now, at least to me
Yeah.
and some others, I know that they are going to serve a larger purpose. I guess I'm just, for me and maybe maybe they do it at episode 5, I don't know, but for me, I'm like, "Okay, well, I'd like to go ahead and see what their purpose is, like, let's get on with the show."
But
So,
yeah.
that's kind of my view on the Harfoots, but I do enjoy them and I like them. I think the storyline's great. It's just I
My
could take them or leave them.
my hopes is that the stranger turns out to be a blue wizard because it's just uncharted territory, and I'd like to see that. And I would also like I agree, I would love to see the Harforce or at least Nori and Poppy maybe have some type of special thing about them that they help bring about something, but
Yeah,
on a scale where, like, it doesn't get spread abroad, like, there's no it's just that's one of those areas where I want it to fit nicely in Tolkien lore where hobbits just, like, weren't even really a thing, whether they existed or not, even if they did exist at that time, they just weren't around, like, no one cared for
right.
them or knew about them, and so it would just seem odd to me if, like, they're, like, standing on a pedestal with people cheering at them, like, it'd just be kinda weird. So I hope something big
Gotcha.
happens with them, something important, but then it's more reserved and
Mhm.
almost like a more like humbling or kind of
I see.
hiding way. But anyway,
So to stay consistent with the lore, really,
yes,
they shouldn't really have a huge,
right,
presence here is
yeah,
what you're saying. Okay,
exactly. At least in my opinion, but I think that's kind of
that makes
fact too.
sense. Yeah, I see. I got you. Cool.
Do you want me to start off on the bad since you started off with the good?
Yeah, let's do it. Sure.
So my bad. Even though, so yeah, Galadriel. Some people were opposed initially of her being like a warrior type. I definitely wasn't opposed to that. I was kind of excited to see maybe like Galadriel out there kicking butt. I was actually pretty excited about that. Um,
Yeah.
the first episode, which is my least favorite, kind of rubbed me the wrong way with a couple things. Like the initial fight scene was just with the troll was not good. I think almost objectively so it wasn't good. Where you have
Yeah.
these Allen warriors that have been fighting together for so many years, and then Galadriel just comes in and just like one shots this troll.
Whoops up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that rubbed me the wrong way. But I kind of overlooked it, whether it's the first episode. And as it continues to go on, fifth episode, a couple things changed in the end where I hope her character changed pretty drastically before the end of the season. I wouldn't mind a quick character development for her. But
Mhm.
so far, she's just come across as like foolish and a little bit
Yeah.
ignorant, like Halbrand almost teaching her things. Whether he's Sauron or not, a lot of things he's teaching her is just kind of simple stuff that an elf who's been around for a few thousand years should know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I don't, and so I think that the writers could have done a better job with her. And that was she was the character I was looking forward most to see develop, and it was the character I think they fell flat with the most. And so that that's been a little bit of a disappointment, and I've kind of seen that each episode.
Yeah, I agree. So I mentioned that she's the one character that I have some problems with. I think it's for the same thing. I, I'm really trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I think that um some of her, I don't know, some of her ignorance, foolishness, rash decision making, or whatever. I do wonder, in the spirit of giving them the benefit of the doubt, if we can't say that her ability to use wisdom well, despite living for thousands of years, has been greatly impacted by how blinded she's been with rage towards the whole thing
Yeah.
regarding her brother. I mean, she's been on this, I don't know the numbers, what, hundreds of years at this point, or maybe thousands, I don't know.
Yeah, it would be
Conquest,
thousands, I
it would
believe.
be thousands, I
Yeah.
guess, yeah. To thousands of year conquest to basically, redeem her brother. She's very clearly not okay. She's very clearly still not over it. And it's still clouding her judgment, I think, quite a bit. And so I do think that um it's consistent with her character to be a little rash, to be a little ignorant, to be a little maybe even foolish at times, because she's so blinded by um that circumstance. Um for me, though, that doesn't forgive or excuse, though, things like the troll scene, like that you're talking about. Like, I am a champion of women, right? But I'm a champion of women for what women are. And so it's again, I'm really big on this with in a lot of different areas in life. I the right thing to do, in my opinion, is to appreciate something for what it is instead of
Yep.
hating it for what it's not. Okay, it's like I gripe with this all the time with people with the Bible, right? Because you get people who um they have bad expectations of what the Bible actually is, and it grows them to fall out of love with the Bible. And so
Mhm.
in my,
Yeah.
it's like
Yep.
when you learn, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna rabbit trail because I haven't rabbit trailed yet this episode, and
Go
that's the whole
for it.
character
You're
development.
allowed to now.
So
Allowed to. There's a
I
right.
am sweet. Yes, I was given permission by my boy Al. That's awesome. So um like a lot of times, if you look at people who've deconverted from Christianity, a lot of times, like I would say 90%, maybe, I don't know exactly. A lot of times people who have deconverted from Christianity have deconverted out of a fundamentalism that was characterized by some very um by some things that are like common, like across the board, in terms of like you can find a lot of people who believe these things. Um, but they're misconceptions, they're misunderstandings even, or they're not very clear as it relates to the Bible. And I don't really have a specific example to give you here, but just stuff like, for example, well, let me give you an example. Some people think, well, the God of the Old Testament is immoral. Well, people who I'm describing would have grown up in a church context where instead of allowing that question and then exploring that question and talking about it, they would get things like, well, you're not supposed to question God, or that it's the no, the God of the Old Testament is not immoral. You're just not reading the passage right, or whatever, whatever, whatever. And it's like, no, do I think the God of the Old Testament is immoral? No, I think it's the only God who, the one true creator God. And I do not think he's immoral, but I could answer that question and look at the scriptures and like articulate things about particular situations. It's like, for example, there's one, specific portion of the Bible where God is commanding conquest, and like actually asking that his people take the lives of other people. And if you just look at that scenario, it's like, oh, why would God ask his people to kill other people? That makes God immoral. Well, it's probably like a 10-hour conversation minimum to have, to look at the nuances and the details, but a lot of people aren't willing to explore that, or they've been told that they're not allowed to explore that. And so what are they doing? They're setting up a caricature in their mind, whether intentionally or unintentionally, usually unintentionally, sadly, of what they think the Bible is, and then they hate it or they think it's wrong or whatever, and so then they fall away from the faith. Well, if you just realize instead that the Bible is an ancient document. It was written in a certain way. There were certain historical and even spiritual assumptions of the people who were writing it, that when you're in their head, things that most modern readers wouldn't pick up on immediately, you get more context and you start to realize, oh, well, because of this, and this is what the Bible is. And so now I can choose to love that for what it is instead of hating it for what it isn't. So that was all that rant to say that I see this in many different areas. And I think as it relates to Galadriel and being a woman or whatever, I'm like, look, I want to love this elf woman for what an elf woman is and what an elf woman should be. Let's not reinvent what our
Yep.
definition of an elf woman is and then try to pretend to love that, because it can't consistently be held to. And so I think this, maybe this is a gripe, I don't know, but the whole warrior goddess thing, like in general, it doesn't feel realistic is the problem. It doesn't feel consistent with what we know about reality. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to rabbit trail on this for just another minute. It's like we watch a show called On Patrol Live, which you might know it by its name that it went by when it was on A&E a couple years ago, called Live PD. If you don't know, they came back out with that show. It's called On Patrol Live, and it's on a network called Reels. Well, multiple times now watching that show, I have witnessed a scenario where a female police officer was overpowered by a male who was fleeing or resisting arrest or whatever. Okay. Overpowered by this person. Now, look, this is not a diss on females. Okay. It's not a diss on females at all. Males have larger bone structures, bigger muscles. They are designed differently. They are oftentimes stronger than women. And I would say in every case, seriously, not kidding, in every case where I have seen a male resist arrest on a female officer, the male was not subdued until one or maybe even more males, whether citizens or other police officers, came in and intervened and helped in that situation. Why? Not because it's any shade on the female. It's just that the female officer in this case is physically weaker than the male suspect or convict or whatever. And so the point I'm making there is that's what reality is. And so when you see things like this Galadriel figure come in, it's inconsistent with what we know about reality. And so that creates tensions. And I'm not, whatever, it's not like ruining it for me, obviously, but it is the one thing where I'm like, that's not real, so it's like, let's kind of, let's deal more in reality. Now I know it's elves and fantasy and all of that, but still, I think what I'm talking about still applies here when we see a female versus a male character, etc.
We've talked about prior episodes too, though, with even with fiction writing, is good fiction writing is still based, like, grounded in reality. You have to believe characters, you have to believe the setting. And so even if that setting, even if there's magic, that magic setting has to be realistic, if that makes sense. So there's certain rules and laws that
I think it makes now I think you could have maybe an exception to this, and this might be fun to banter about at some point in the future, but maybe an exception to this is if you create a world where the female and male roles are like reversed in that world or something. Like maybe you create a world, I don't know, where like it's like very clear that like a major feature of that world is the males are like puny weaklings and the females are warrior goddesses. But like if you don't create that sort of assumption about the world, or you don't in fact clearly state that that's what's going on in this world, then people I think are just going to assume that even the fantasy world operates according to a lot of the same bumpers as the real world does, and then you're going to create problems. So
absolutely
cool.
great repertoire.
Yeah, sorry about that, but
no, you're good. Why don't I know that you've kind of have some things here on your list. Go ahead and talk about your first couple points, because that kind of flows into mine.
Yeah, I will, real quick. So the first one is, and in fact, some of these let me just say this. A lot of my bad about the show is actually more of like bad around the show. Okay. Bad that I'm seeing and hearing. I don't have that much bad to say about the actual production of the show itself, to be honest. I'm really liking it.
Yeah.
So what's the bad? Well, the writers are not Tolkien, which I've already discussed. I think if you're not going into it with the assumption that the writers are Tolkien, then then it's okay. But sure enough, the writers are not Tolkien. You don't have the literary beauty in some things. Like I've definitely seen some really great quotes and stuff. I've seen some other ones that people have pointed out online where it's like, you know, they pointed out that it's kind of crappy prose over and against what maybe Tolkien would have written. And to that I say, okay, great. It just so happens that Tolkien is arguably the best, at least one of the best, if not the best fiction writers to have ever walked the face of the earth. I mean, that's probably a fair statement, I would say.
Sure.
And it's kind of really difficult to imagine holding him to this standard or holding the show to the standard that it could be even that good. The second thing related to that, and just it's just with the writing, and again the idea about how purists think about it and everything, I just like to like assume that the writers don't suck. Okay. Amazon has a lot of money. They have spent a lot of money on this show. And so while yes, there are some things where maybe preferentially speaking, you know, we might have not liked a particular thing or thought a particular thing could have been better. I've just seen a lot of people really dissing the writers on this show. And I think that some of these scenarios, they're just not being given enough credit. Like maybe superficially, if you look at it for just a minute, or if you're looking for something to be wrong with it, you might find some things. Like I recall some people pointing out inconsistencies between like a character will say something, but then like a minute or two later, they violate the principle that they said or whatever. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe there's some merit to that, but also like m- maybe we should assume that a lot of eyes have seen this and they generally don't suck and they generally are trying to be consistent. And so maybe there's something about that that you're missing, or maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is that the character is inconsistent and we are supposed to take notice of that. And I'm not going to rabbit trail here, but I'll just make the quick comparison that this is also like what happens, you know, in biblical studies and in other things as well, where you're looking, if you're looking for something to be wrong, there are all kinds of things you can point out. But if you instead start with the bias that, yeah, writers generally don't contradict themselves. Amazon is probably going to hire the best people that they possibly can to be writers on this, given the budget of the show. If you take those things into account, it's kind of like maybe you should go a little deeper on what's being said. Maybe it'll make more sense, or maybe there's something to it that you're missing. Is that a possibility? You know, so I would say just making the general assumption that the writers don't suck could lead to potentially a
Mhm.
better understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah. No, I think, yeah, well worded. I agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
Sweet. All right, you go.
Yeah, so kind of going off from that into the writing, again, I kind of give the benefit of the doubt just because there are certain things that they don't have access to for lore, certain things that they do, and I don't know the exact specifics on, every little thing, but there are some things with the lore that they change that do just kind of rub me the wrong way. And again, the first episode was probably the worst in my opinion. I think the first episode had quite a bit of stuff in it that just could have been a lot better for a first episode. But one thing that I really didn't like, because it kind of set the stage for Galadriel's vengeance, it also just kind of changed the perspective of how we see some characters. So the biggest gripe that I had was with Finrod, where the show made it out to seem that he had spent his whole life ended up trying to track down Sauron and kill Sauron, and that
Mhm.
was his sole goal. Where in reality, and I don't know if you've seen this in the videos, see by looking at stuff, but in reality, what happened, yeah, in the first stage was, um, I don't know this, forget the specific names of the specific battles, but a man saved Finrod's life, and so, in repayment for that, I forget if it was 50 years later or a few hundred years later, but this man's great great grandson, descendant, or son, or whoever, Baron, um, was on a quest and to steal one of the Cimmerils from Melkor. But anyway, um, Finrod, in order to repay his vow, said, "Hey, I will go and help you with this." So he went with him and helped him, and on the way, they basically got enslaved in one of Sauron's fortresses. Um, and so
Oh,
he did end up dying at the hand of Sauron. And in that moment. Baron ended up escaping. I think he was the only person that lived from there. There was a group of other people, I believe, that were ensnared there, though I could be wrong on that. And so it wasn't, he didn't die trying to seek Sauron out to kill him because he wanted to. He was some like John Wick character trying to kill all the bad guys. He was trying to fulfill his, his debt to this line of men by, helping out this man. And to me, maybe it doesn't, but to me, it just kind of changed a little bit. Someone watching the show who may not know that and thinking a little bit differently of the elves' minds and kind of, especially Finrod and Galadriel, and kind of what their drive is towards, where I think it's just very, even though it's kind of subtle, I don't think it is. It's very kind of two different ways of
You're
how they
right.
think. And so that
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's
that
great. Yeah.
really that it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Now they haven't brought it up since that for this episode, so I guess it doesn't have a huge bearing on the show itself, but just some weird stuff like that. And I'll go through them real quickly here, but
Sure.
like another one is Galadriel being forced back in a way to Valinor, and the other people
Right.
having to fulfill the quest to go back, where Valinor was something that like the elves could return to whenever they wanted to, or they could stay in Middle Earth. It was kind of a free thing, much like salvation, I guess you could say. It's something that you choose to, not
Mm,
that you're forced into. Um, and then
interesting.
episode 5 had you haven't seen it yet, but they kind of went through a backstory, which the shooting of it, how it was filmed, was really cool. But just a backstory on how Mithril might have been made, and I hope it's just kind of a cool story they put in there as like a folklore thing. Because if they do make it an actual thing in the show, it just is kind of dumb for a multitude of reasons, but I won't spoil anything with that. And then I don't mind some shows taking characters out. Just because, if a book has 50 characters, you may not be able to develop it all. So I'm totally okay with taking characters out to, fit the time frame. But I don't get that they added, so you have a Isildur, then you have his brother, and that's it. But for some reason the show added a sister
Yeah.
to the casting. And I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, except the sister storyline so far has been kind of boring. I don't really see, she hasn't played a
Right.
big
Yeah.
part in it. And so just a random addition to that just kind of throws me off. But there's other stuff too. But so there are some things when they come up, I'll like, sometimes it'll be such an obvious deviation that I'll think, like, am I wrong on that? Like that seems kind of weird. So I'll make a note of it. And then I'll look it up after and I'll say, no, I was right on that. That didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, probably the worst one is the
Yeah.
first one I listened the first episode about Finrod. They just really changed the backstory to Galadriel and everything, which I didn't like. Everything else has been kind of more of a preference thing, I guess.
Yeah, nitpicky probably, yeah,
Yeah.
but that's a pretty big one for sure. So yeah, I'm on board with you there. That's maybe more liberty than they should have
Yeah.
taken with that. I would say.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's what I was. Yeah. That was the one. That's the one big one for me, at least.
yeah, very good. Okay, cool. So my next one is I really think the pacing could be improved quite a bit. I think this is definitely more of a um, I guess general like, critique. Yours have all been pretty specific, which is great and needed because you're the right. So you're kind of the Tolkien nerd, right? So with the assumption that I'm not,
Amongst us
right?
too.
Yeah, amongst us too. Yeah, I just from a general standpoint, it's like, yeah, the show's kind of slow. I think it was Ben Shapiro who opined that episodes 1 and 2 could probably have been smashed together. Um, and I agree with that. My caveat there is that I really do like all of the storylines. So I like I said earlier, even the Harfoots. I mean, even though I could see where I could take or leave that one, all of the individual plot lines and storylines I think are pretty cool. I'm appreciative of getting like even me being on the very outside edges of even a Tolkien fan or whatever, like I appreciate that, like the role that like Isildur plays or whatever in the
Mm.
show. Like I like that's a name that I knew and recognized from what
Right.
I'm reading. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this is pretty cool because it's thousands of years ago, backstory stuff to that. And I'm starting to pick up on some of the little things, like for example, how the men of Numenor are able to live longer than just your regular run of the mill old guy and stuff like that.
Let
So,
me interrupt you
um,
there just for a second
yeah,
because it has to do exactly with the Numenorians. I thought I was wrong on this because I didn't see any review person bring it up, and so I was stunned, and maybe I still feel stupid about it, even though I've kind of confirmed my mind. But the Numenorians too, if not all of them, most of them were like like super tall, like mini giants. So like Elendil on the show,
Interesting.
he's
Yeah.
supposed to be over 7 feet tall. He's like 7'2", 7'3", or something. Like so, the
Really?
Numenorians not only didn't have long age, but they also were known for being. I think their average height was at least like 6.5 feet or something
Yeah.
like that. But
Yeah.
yet they're like normal. And I guess maybe it would be difficult to do all the CGI and have it consistent across the series. I do get it. It's not like I'm mad about it,
Yeah.
but I'm
Right.
just
Yeah.
surprised that, and that was one of the things that I picked up on because I was excited to kind of see how they would make the Numenorians. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like, have you heard that kind of,
No.
that's what
No,
made
I
me feel
haven't.
stupid about it because I was thinking maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't think I
Mm.
am.
Yeah, because otherwise they kind of look like regular old dudes,
Just
right?
regular
I
people,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's kind of
Anyway,
interesting.
sorry to interrupt you there, just you brought them
All
up, go
good.
ahead.
No, yeah. So I think so. The pacing I think could be improved. I'm sympathetic. I understand that there's 5 seasons to this. They're going to
Mm,
take their time. I would say they have to take their time. They're not in any rush here. But I do think some of the development and stuff could have been um, a little quicker. So personal preference thing maybe. But then my last one is that I do feel like that they're bumping into some unfortunate licensing
mm,
limitations. I feel like they're not quite able to go all the way into the lore as much as they really would like to without having to hedge.
yeah,
It's like there seems to and by the way, I don't think that you know I think you'd have to know the lore pretty well to like really see those things as you're watching the show. For me, I'm really only seeing it when I'm watching the review shows and stuff from the nerds who are looking at it and like pointing all of these things out. But when they point it out, it's like, "Oh, okay, well, I can definitely see where they're bumping into, like, a real world licensing limitation here." It's like they legit can't go any further down that path because if they do, they're in violation of copyrights, and that kinda sucks in the sense that, I'd really love for them to just be able to dive into these things. I think it would make for a better show overall. And so I don't know. It is kind of where those, and we talked about this too with the, viewership and things like that. This is kind of an interesting place where there's always a blend between real world, business, marketing, the stuff that I talk about,
right,
and the fiction stuff and whatever. Entertainment ultimately has to be profitable or you can't afford to do it, right? That's even back in the day of where you had a patron, the whole patron model of, an artist would have, people who could afford like kings and people, leaders in the town or whatever, like they would have people who would pay for them to do their art. Paying to be entertained. And so there is a business side to entertainment. And unfortunately, sometimes those real life business limitations, you know, um, the art suffers because of them. And so I think this is one case where you could say that. Like if they just had the rights to the Silmarillion too, it's like there are so many avenues where they could have gone, I think, deeper into, and that I think the show would have been better for it. But
I I think on one aspect it would, but on the other hand, think about it now, I think it's almost a blessing in disguise that they're limited to what they are doing because I can definitely see, and me myself included, where if they said, "Hey, yeah, we're going to write this show. It's going to take place at the end of the Second Age, but we're also going to give you license to the all of Silmarillion," that would give them more license to really properly address lore stuff. But at the same time, I can also see them again for adaptability for the television, them really botching some pretty
screwing things
critical
up.
token things.
Yeah.
So I think it's almost a blessing in
Yeah,
disguise that they
it's fair.
are limited in scope. It,
As Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility.
yeah, Uncle Ben.
So, yep, yep, yep. So that's it. I mean, yeah,
Cool.
I agree. I think you're spot on there.
Um, I'm gonna go through my last points quickly. These ones are mostly, you kind of find some of these things in every show. It's just more or less things that put you out of the realism of the show. So I'm just gonna go down this quick list. The first one is, I think it happened in episode 4 when Galadriel fought the 3 guards in the tower. Do you remember that scene? And she like, it
Yeah.
was kind of an off scene fight, and all of a sudden, the last split second, you see they're like throwing 3 men with one push into a prison cell.
Right. 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 Right.
And it's just one instance where I'm totally okay with Galadriel beating up 3 guys, just make it kind of realistic and brutal. to some
Right,
extent.
right, 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 right.
It takes me out of that realism element. A couple other things. This last recent episode, you didn't see it, but there was just a cringy sparring scene that I just don't like, and you'll know, I think, what I mean when you watch it. So let me know what you think about it. I don't want to spoil it for you, Steve. It's just a cringy scene. Anyway,
Gotcha.
um,
Sure, sure.
but I kind of touched on this a little bit. Halbrand apparently being smarter than Galadriel. Again, maybe if he's Sauron, that could explain it, but it's mostly simple stuff that he's kind of teaching her. Um, and this is a gripe that people have a lot more than I do. It doesn't but it kind of puts me out a little bit is the ethnicities that are just kind of showing living together. I don't really care about it too much. Like in Numenor, you do have a broad range of people living there. It's a huge island. That doesn't really bother me too much. But then you have the Harfoots, who there might be 100 people in the group, and you have like 3 or 4 different ethnicities there, and
Oh, yeah,
it
yeah.
kinda like, I can't help every time watching it just thinking, like, "How did these people end up together? Like, are they the same people or are they not?" And
Right.
if they're not, how like, hobbits were that big then? Like, I'm picturing this group to be, like, basically the only group of, hobbits or it's so
So
it
where's all that diversity?
whereas yeah, exactly. So it just kinda puts me
Yeah.
on the elephant. And then one thing that I love the Harfoot kind of line of stories, but one thing I don't get is that they just like basically leave behind the weak. And
I know, it just
just
feels so unfortunate,
so
you know?
it's so weird. Now maybe there's a point to it.
Yeah.
I guess if they face that much evil or hardship along the trail, and the only way for all of them to survive is to put the weakest in the bag. I guess it
Yeah,
makes sense.
it's like,
But it just
"Poor little Minnie who stubbed her
yeah,
toe, we left her behind, people
exactly.
remember." It's like, "What?" Like,
Yeah, exactly.
it
Yeah. It's,
I don't know, that's
so
why I said I could take
but
or leave that one.
these those moments though, they kind of show that there are very good moments in this show simply because the bad ones really stick out. Anytime a really like kind of
Oh,
a
yeah.
bad unflattering scene happens, it sticks out like a sore thumb. I just came into my mind too. One thing that I just realized, we didn't have one complaint about Arondir the elf or Doran or Elrond. I think those two kind
Yeah,
of storylines, while maybe not perfect, are the most solid right now.
yeah,
Going on.
I
They're
agree.
very well developed. Um,
I think most people are really loving the Elrond and Durand,
oh yeah,
especially.
absolutely. The guy, I forget his name, Olaf or something like that, who's playing Durin. That guy just nails that part, and
Yeah,
it's so good. It's so good. It's
yeah.
everything I would want from an elf dwarf friendship.
Mhm.
Anyway, so yeah, I guess to sum up my
Yeah.
thoughts, I'm definitely enjoying it. I'm glad there's a Rings of Power. Um, some things rub me the wrong way a little bit more than others, but I'm still going to keep watching it, and I really hope that it gets even better. It's the first season. I'm hoping that
Oh, yeah.
it's hitting its stride more and more each episode, and so I just hope that momentum keeps going. And who knows, maybe by the end of it, we'll be looking, and I hope we can say, man, like this fifth season, they did an awesome job. Wrapping it up. So
Mhm.
hopefully it turns out that way.
Yeah, I'm hoping that some of the critical stuff will wane even I guess I hope that it gets to the point where everybody can just kind of go back to business as usual and just accept that it's a really good show.
This is the comeback of
And
2022. Everyone's talking
right.
about it and
Yeah, it's like stop where every episode and I'm sure it's not gonna be, because of what it is, it's I think it's always gonna be every time a new episode comes out, it's gonna be an event, everybody's
yeah.
gonna be excited about it. And Amazon needs it to be that way in order for it to be profitable, frankly. But it's like chill a little bit with the criticism. Let's just try to enjoy it as much as we can and then go from there. So
Yep.
it's just a TV show at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
It's a
it's a
freaking
TV
TV
show.
show.
It's a
It's
t
like
it's not even like, an adaptation of the Bible, like the Passion of the Christ, and, like, people get
right.
about stuff like that. It's something that's
Yeah.
made up.
Yeah, it's TV. So, get over it.
But it took up an hour-long podcast, so, like,
It did.
there are
It
others
did.
out there.
100%.
Alright, story of the week. I'll go ahead, first, I guess, if that works for you.
Yeah, go for it.
My story of the week, so when, Kanye, good old Kanye, came out with his gospel album, gee, I think it was 3 years ago now. Yeah, it had to have been. Um, I forget what the album's called, but I listened through it and like it was okay. It was decent. There were a couple songs on there that I really liked, but one of them that I really liked was called Use This Gospel. And it just got a really good beat and rhythm to it. I've always liked Kanye too anyway. And so I really like this song. And so I told Amazon the other day, I said, play Use This Gospel by Kanye. I was like, it's been probably a year since I've listened to it. And then I saw that is his name Khalid? I'm not sure, but some other
Wiz
rappers.
Khalid, is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Khalid?
He ended up making a remix of it. And I was like, okay, like I'll listen to it. It sounded pretty similar to it. And it said Kanye West and Eminem. And I was like, what does that mean? And so it just kind of it was weird. So I listened to it, and the first part is a little bit different, but it was just Kanye doing his thing. And the intro, I guess it was the first verse, and then for the chorus, I think it starts out with like the chorus. Anyway, the first verse they changed it up where it's all Eminem. And have you listened to it,
Huh.
Steve?
No.
We'll listen to it after together. But
Yeah.
it is like if it wasn't anyway, I do not like judging people's hearts, so I'm not going to. It's just kind of funny how just with Eminem being known for kind of being, like a quote unquote
Sure.
worldly, rapper.
Yeah.
And if you when you listen to what he's rapping about, it kind of blows your mind a little bit. Anyway,
Interesting.
this song with Eminem, the remix topped the Christian charts for a week or two or however long.
Really?
So I
You
think he's like
serious?
it's something like he's the first artist ever to hit like the top Christian he broke some sort of record by hitting the top Christian chart as well. But yeah, Eminem got like a number one hit song on the I don't know by what measurement, I don't know if it's gospel or what, but awesome.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
I'll listen to it with you after. But anyway, yeah. That's my story of the week. I just thought it was
Man.
cool and interesting. I did
Okay.
some research on it too afterwards. Sorry, I did some research on it too with Eminem. And I guess like in his first album before Slim Shady, like there's a song in there all about him like saying that like, God's placed him where he is and there's nothing else. And that's the only way that he's, at where he is. Anyway, just like I guess there's a whole history with him kind of inserting
Interesting.
stuff in there. So I just thought it was neat and just something to fun to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really I'll say to you, this is off topic, kind of. But I noticed that I don't know if you know that Toby Mac, I'm sure you know who Toby Mac is. His son died like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And it was an accidental overdose from what I understand, and terrible situation. Well, just a few weeks ago, I think they interviewed Toby Mac on Good Morning America,
Yeah.
and like they did like a piece on him, and like you know,
That's pretty
frankly,
big. Yeah.
let him say things that they don't
Yeah.
normally let you say
I was pretty
on
surprised. Yeah.
the news. And so again, this is not a religious podcast, and you guys know by now, like story of the week, you can turn us off if you want to, but this is it's an interesting thing to me. I'm seeing more scenario like CNN, even CNN has sort of reneged a little on the way that they handle certain things in terms of like what you might call wokeness and things like that. Like they
Mhm.
were losing all of their ratings because people were just getting so tired of it. And so like, and you've seen big companies like Netflix and stuff. And so I'm not pontificating on anything here other than to say things are looking pretty interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Congo. Things are looking pretty bad in the Congo. Things are looking pretty strange in the Congo in that it is. I'm not saying obviously I don't think we're like on the brink of experiencing some Christian revival in America. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm just saying it's interesting that Christianity is being given maybe a hair more of a voice than it has been in the
Mhm.
past couple years in the
Yeah.
public scene, and I'm not exactly sure what all that's about. Um,
Yeah.
but it's not a bad thing that people are getting to hear the gospel
Yeah.
in a scenario where they normally wouldn't. I don't care if the gospel comes out of Eminem's mouth, my mouth, or a
Yeah.
rock's mouth.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's still the gospel, right? So in that regard, I think that's a really, really cool
Yeah.
thing.
Definitely.
So to completely 180 into my story of the week. It's of course a businessy marketing related one, and it's just but it is story related, and it's the advice to stay out of your client's wallet. I've heard this thing many times by different people, but whoever said it this way, I forget who it was. It might have been Jenny Blake. That's really random, but she's an author. It might have been Jenny Blake that I heard say this, but that's not the gospel for sure. Um, but stay out of your client's wallet. Whoever said it, this is the way they said it. And I was like, oh, that's so powerful. What it means is stop assuming what people can pay for things. And that's it. I mean, that's the lesson. Stop assuming what people, a lot of times when we try to sell people things or whatever, we think in terms of um, what we would or could afford to pay for it. And ultimately
Mhm,
what we're doing there, guess what, is we're creating a story. We're creating a story that's not real in our mind, that biases what maybe our products or services or whatever are worth. And so we need to stay out of our client's wallet. We need to charge fairly for things that we sell, regardless of the price. And it will price some clients out of working with you. There are people who cannot afford to work with me and my team today. And
mhm.
it's for whatever reason. Like, again, you could put whatever story behind that you want to, but there are people who just can't afford to do it because we can't afford to support people who aren't paying a certain amount because we have bills, and
Yeah.
also we're pretty good. So like we should get paid good for what we do. And if it will, you'll always be held back. And I still, by the way, I still struggle with this. You'll always be held back if you're constantly reaching into your client's wallet and making assumptions about what they can charge. Honestly, you should just never have that thought. It should always just be, hey, look, this is the price, and then shut up and then wait for
Mhm,
them to say something. Because very, very often people are better financially than you give them credit for being.
mhm.
And they, or
And are
or
willing
even
to
if they're not, it
yeah.
doesn't matter. That's the point. It literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If they, with the exception of, okay, like Dave Ramsey tells people not to use credit cards, so you cannot buy something from Dave Ramsey with a credit card. Okay, that's called being consistent. And so I appreciate that. However, I'm not telling people that they can't buy with a credit card. So while I may be tempted as a personal finance nerd to feel bad if they're using a credit card or reaching into their savings or whatever to pay for my services, that's none of my business, frankly. They wanted my services. I gave them the price. They agreed, and that's it. Really, I should not think about it uh, any more than that. And I'll say, sadly, I spend way too much time even today knowing this, thinking about things like that. But honestly, we should just be staying out of our client's wallet at all. Right? It ends with,
Mhm.
this is what you should pay for this thing because it's worth it, and that's it. So
And if
anyway,
you're wrong on the price, then the market will let you know and you can always adjust.
that's right. Then the market will let you know, and you can always adjust. And I'll be kind of vague about this, but in our work that we're doing, I think I potentially could have been a little wrong about one of the prices that we were putting out there, and so the market told me that, and so I adjusted. And so here we are, right? And we're gonna see what happens with that, right?
It's
But yeah,
interesting, as a, kind of video game creator dabbling in it and just looking at market stuff. I'll see a lot of times when video games first come out, they'll put a price point up, and I'll see sometimes a video game will, on their release date, the game will be $20. And then 2 weeks later, it'll be up to 25 because they're selling like hotcakes and they realize they could make
yeah,
a lot more money. And then other times that
yeah,
happens more often than not. The other option, the other times that I see, again, I'm looking at mostly popular games that have kind of made it. I will also see times though where a game will come out at $20 and then 2 or 3 months later, their new flat price will be 15. And
right.
so you see those adjustments, and that's fine. It's just, people are willing to pay for your product.
Well, and funny enough, one of the best ways you can measure this is if too many people are saying yes. Okay, now that might sound funny,
Mm,
but if everybody says yes to your thing, then it's not expensive enough, right?
Yep.
You don't have enough resistance there. And that's especially true in the services industry, because it's like, me and a colleague, he runs a business similar to mine. We actually do a lot of work together. And his business, it's like he'll quote a price, and the people are like, yes, within 5 minutes. And he's like, oh, I should have charged $1,000 more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's really funny because at a certain point, after you do this long enough, right? you almost get to a point where it's like it would we're talking about a project that was in this particular case thousands of dollars, right? Where most people in his position, would be like, yes, they said yes, and he's like, I just
I
lost
couldn't have done
money,
it before.
and it's kind of funny to be to the point where it's like you're upset because they said yes, but it's true. It's like if you're not experiencing any price resistance on your thing, you're too cheap. You
Yep.
know, that's just that's just business, right? That's basic sort of business economics,
Right.
and it's important. So,
Good stuff, Steve.
all right. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Great episode on the Rings of
Yep.
Power, and um, I hope again, like check it out. It's a great show. I think you guys
Yep.
should definitely watch it. And I would say, you don't need to have much context at all with the Lord of the Rings. I think to jump into it, I think a
Yeah,
complete
definitely.
newbie could jump into it, and
Yep.
I think it'll create a love for the entire world for you. So definitely do it.
Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time.
All right, later.